You ever look around and wonder why, with all the information we have, all the knowledge at our fingertips, we don't seem to have more wisdom? Well, today we're going to dive into a really powerful way of thinking about education, one that connects what we know with how we live. And we're going to use the journeys of the Apostle Paul to see how something like data can lead to some real, genuine insight.
Yeah, let's just jump right in with this one. A culture filled with educated people making destructive choices. I mean, that hits pretty close to home, doesn't it? We see brilliant people creating things that cause harm and whole societies that struggle even with all of our amazing technology. It really makes you stop and ask, what's the point of all this education if it isn't helping us build a better, more peaceful world? And this gets to the heart of what some call a crisis of knowledge. The idea is that knowledge, all by itself, without any kind of moral compass, or as the source material says, without God's Spirit, well, it can make you clever, for sure, but it doesn't necessarily make you wise. It's that huge gap between knowing how to build something and having the wisdom to know whether you should. So this really presents us with two different paths for learning. On one side, you have the carnally minded approach. That's where you just focus on facts and skills alone, and that can lead to some pretty destructive places. But then you have the spiritually minded path, and that's where you take all that knowledge and you weave it together with values, with faith. That's the path that's meant to build integrity and lead to a much better outcome. And this verse, right here from the book of Romans, this is the bedrock for this whole way of thinking. It's saying that our mindset isn't just a small choice. It's the thing that fundamentally shapes our reality. And the promise here is just incredible. If you orient your mind in a spiritual way, the result, the end game, is life and peace. Okay, so that all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like? How does this work in the real world? Well, believe it or not, we're going to peek inside a 6th grade math class. We're about to see how looking at data from Paul's journeys can teach important math concepts and, at the same time, become a lesson in actual wisdom. So the key math idea here is data variability, and you can see the method right away. Instead of just a dry, boring definition from a textbook, the idea is instantly tied to a story we can relate to. Paul's experiences were different in every single city he visited. Well, that is just like that. It changes. And knowing that, understanding that variation, is the very first step to making a wise decision. So for our first example, we're going to use a scatter plot. This is a great way to visualize how different towns and cities actually responded to what Paul had to say. It turns a bunch of numbers into a human story. All right, here's the data. And you can see that variability immediately, can't you? 100 new believers in Antioch, but only 15 in Athens. Whoa. 120 in Philippi. Every single one of these numbers has a story behind it. Now, when you plot this out, you start to see the practical side of it. For Paul, this wasn't just interesting trivia. This information would have been absolutely essential for planning and for prayer. It would help him get ready for whatever he might face in the next city. This is exactly what we mean by data-driven wisdom. Okay, next up, let's try a line graph. These are the perfect tool when you want to see a trend over a period of time, like, for example, the increasing distance of Paul's journeys. And the data here is super straightforward. First journey, 200 miles. Second, 400. Third, 600. You can literally watch his commitment and his mission field just expand across the map. And that's the magic of a line graph, isn't it? It makes that trend just pop right off the page. You're not just looking at a list of numbers anymore. You're seeing a story unfold, a story of growing dedication and of an impact that was reaching more and more people over time. All right, for our last example, let's use a bar graph. These are fantastic for comparing different amounts across different categories. In this case, we're going to look at the number of churches that were started in different regions. So here you have it. You can see right away that regions like Achaia and Macedonia were really becoming hotspots for growth, while other places were having more humble beginnings. Each bar represents a new community of faith taking root. What a bar graph does so well is make that comparison crystal clear. At a glance, you can tell exactly where the message was spreading the fastest. And that's not just interesting, it's strategic. It would have told the early church where to send support, where to write letters, where more teaching was needed. It's another awesome example of using data to understand what's going on. And you know, after looking at all that data on church growth, this verse from Acts just brings it all home. The graphs, they showed us the what, the numbers, the trends, the growth. But this verse, it tells us the why and the how. The churches were growing because they were being strengthened in their faith.
The data and the scripture, they just make each other richer.
So, when you put it all together, what does it all mean? Well, this whole lesson is obviously about a lot more than math. It's really a call to rethink our entire approach to learning and, maybe even reshape our future.
So here's the big idea in a nutshell. Learning skills like how to analyze data or make a graph, that's not just a homework assignment. These are powerful tools that help us see patterns, make smarter choices, and maybe even get a glimpse of God's work in the world. It's all about using what we know for a higher purpose.
And that brings us right back to where we started. This powerful truth, to be spiritually minded is life in peace. It goes so far beyond a single math lesson. Think about it. Whether you're in science or business or the arts, whatever you do, if you use that as your compass, as the ultimate filter for all your knowledge, it could change everything.
So, we'll leave you with this question to chew on. It's not just about what you know, it's about what you do with what you know. In your job, in your studies, in your family, how will you use everything you're learning not just to be clever, but to be truly wise? How will you use it to build a life of genuine peace for yourself and for the people around you?